So there's Jake Murphy, sitting in the back row of Advanced Weapons Theory at the Galactic Military Academy, wondering for the 100th time why he ever thought this was a good idea. The classroom looks like someone threw a rave inside a spaceship, all glowing panels and floating holographic displays, and Jake is pretty sure his desk is judging him. It probably is. Everything in this place has artificial intelligence, including, he suspects, the toilet paper. He's the only human in a class of 47 students, which makes him about as popular as a wet fart in an elevator. To his left sits Thrini, a mantis-looking alien who has way too many eyes and uses every single one of them to glare at Jake's notes. To his right is Gorp, who's basically a sentient pile of purple jello with delusions of grandeur. Gorp jiggles disapprovingly whenever Jake breathes too loud. At the front of the class, Professor Kreltalk is holding court. Kreltalk has 4 arms, 0 sense of humor, and a superiority complex the size of a small moon. He's currently waving all 4 arms around like he's conducting an orchestra, except the orchestra is his own ego and it's playing a symphony called Humans Are Primitive Idiots. And so, Kreltalk announces, his translator making him sound like a disappointed parent, we arrive at the dark ages of warfare, the kinetic weapon era. Primitive species would actually hurl small pieces of metal at each other using controlled explosions. Can you imagine? The class erupts in laughter. Thrini's mandibles click together in what Jake has learned is alien amusement. Gorp jiggles so hard he nearly loses cohesion. Jake slumps lower in his seat. These barbaric devices, Kreltalk continues, clearly enjoying himself, were called guns, rifles, pistols, quaint names for quaint tools. They relied on chemical propellants, had moving parts that could jam, and required the user to actually aim manually, with their eyes, like animals. More laughter. Jake notices Kreltalk's main eyes are locked onto him. Of course they are. Mr. Murphy, Kreltalk says, and the entire class turns to stare. Your species still uses these relics, do you not? Earth Defense Forces still carry powder weapons into battle? Jake clears his throat. We call it gunpowder, and yeah, we do. Fascinating, Kreltalk says, in a tone that suggests it's anything but. And tell me, have humans not discovered plasma containment? Energy focusing? Molecular destabilization? We have, Jake replies. We just prefer what works. What works? Kreltalk repeats, savoring the words like they're a fine wine of stupidity. Class, this is why humanity remains on the fringe of galactic civilization. They cling to obsolete technology out of sentimentality. It's rather adorable, in a tragic sort of way. Thrini raises 3 of her 6 arms. Professor, is it true that human weapons can be stopped by simple metal plates? Indeed. Kreltalk nods. Armor rendered kinetic weapons obsolete millennia ago across civilized space. But please, let's not belabor the point. Mr. Murphy's ancestors didn't know any better. They were working with the limited understanding available to a pre-contact species. Jake grips his datapad a little tighter. He spent 6 months at this academy, 6 months of constant condescension, and he's starting to understand why humanity's first contact went so badly. It wasn't cultural differences or communication problems, it was because the aliens are insufferable, know-it-all jerks. Now then, Kreltalk announces, for your midterm practical examination, each of you will present your species' most advanced personal weapon system. You'll demonstrate its capabilities, explain its theoretical foundations, and compare it to historical alternatives. Mr. Murphy, I'm sure you can find a particularly shiny rock to bring in. The class laughs again. Even the desk seems to be laughing. Jake smiles. It's not a nice smile. Sure thing. Professor, he says, I'll bring something from home. The next week turns into the galaxy's most obnoxious show-and-tell preparation period. Jake can't walk 10 feet without someone bragging about their upcoming weapon demonstration. The Academy's social hub, which humans would call a cafeteria but aliens insist on calling a nutritional convergence center, becomes ground zero for insufferable posturing. Thrini corners Jake near the protein synthesizers, all 6 of her arms gesturing wildly. I'm bringing a Mark 7 plasma caster, she announces, like she's revealing the cure for cancer. It can ionize targets at 400 meters and has 17 different firing modes. What are you bringing, Murphy? A sharp stick? Something like that, Jake says, trying to squeeze past her. I heard humans still use iron sights, Thrini continues, blocking his path. You know, physically looking at the target? My weapon has an AI-assisted tracking system that can predict enemy movement patterns based on thermal signatures and probability matrices. It practically aims itself. Sounds foolproof, Jake mutters. Oh, it is. The consortium military rated it as having a 0.003% failure rate under optimal conditions, Jake stops. Under optimal conditions? Well, yes, standard temperature, standard pressure, minimal electromagnetic interference, that sort of thing. Why? No reason, Jake says, filing that information away in the part of his brain labeled useful later. Gorp is even worse. The gelatinous blob has somehow assembled a support team of 3 smaller blobs, and they follow Jake around the academy like a wobbly entourage. My molecular destabilizer, Gorp announces during astrogation class, during lunch, during a bathroom break, can phase shift matter at the quantum level. I can literally make targets cease to exist in this dimensional plane. Cool, Jake says, not looking up from his sandwich. Real bread, shipped from Earth at enormous expense, because the synthesized stuff tastes like cardboard had a baby with disappointment. It requires a direct satellite uplink and a 3-person support crew to manage the power distribution, Gorp continues proudly. But the results are spectacular. What's your weapon require? A prayer and good luck? Jake takes a bite of his sandwich. Pretty much. The betting starts on day 3. Jake discovers there's an actual gambling pool, sanctioned by the student council, with odds on how badly he'll humiliate himself. He's currently at 50-1 against him, even hitting the target. Someone named Vrix Nal is offering 100 credits if Jake's weapon explodes in his hands. Professor Kreltalk makes it worse during the next class session. I've secured the Academy's premier testing facility for our demonstrations, he announces. It has holographic target systems, atmospheric controls, regeneration pods in case of accidents, and a full medical team on standby. Mr. Murphy, we've added extra insurance coverage for your presentation specifically. The class finds this hilarious. Additionally, Kreltalk continues, I've invited several military observers from the Galactic Defense Consortium. This is an excellent opportunity for you all to showcase your species' contributions to modern warfare. Well, most of you, anyway. Jake notices Kreltalk's main eyes drift toward him during that last part. Thrinny leans over. It's not too late to withdraw, you know. Save yourself the embarrassment. And miss all this fun? Jake replies, not a chance. That evening, Jake sits in his dorm room, which is designed for a species with tentacles, and keeps trying to moisturize him against his will. He pulls up his datapad and sends a message back to Earth. The reply comes 3 hours later due to the distance lag. His uncle's message is short. Shipping what you asked for. Customs gave me hell. Try not to start a war. Love you, kid. Jake grins. The day before the demonstration, the entire class takes a field trip to the weapons testing facility. It's a massive underground complex that looks like it was designed by someone who thought subtle was a curse word. Everything gleams, everything hums with power, and everything costs more than Jake's home state's GDP. Targets materialize and dematerialize in the range. Force fields shimmer like heat waves. The walls are lined with enough sensors to track a photon's emotional state. Gorp jiggles up beside Jake. Impressive, isn't it? This facility can simulate any combat environment in the known galaxy. Vacuum, underwater, high gravity, low gravity, corrosive atmospheres, you name it. I assume you'll need the easiest setting? I'll manage, Jake says. Oh, I'm sure, Gorp replies. By the way, I put 20 credits on you missing every shot. Nothing personal, just good business. Jake watches as technicians calibrate the systems. He watches the force fields flicker. He watches the power distribution nodes glow along the walls. Yeah, he says quietly. Good business. Range day arrives with all the pomp and circumstance of a royal wedding, if royal weddings involved potential dismemberment and required liability waivers. Jake shows up early, mostly because the Academy's moisture-happy dorm room tried to give him a 6 a.m. algae bath, and he decided sleeping was overrated anyway. The testing facility is already buzzing with activity. Technicians scurry around like caffeinated squirrels, checking power couplings and calibrating sensors. The military observers Kreltalk mentioned are set up in a shielded observation deck that looks like it could survive a nuclear strike. Jake counts at least a dozen species represented up there, all wearing fancy uniforms and expressions that suggest they'd rather be literally anywhere else. His classmates arrive in clusters, each hauling their weapons like they're presenting newborns to a deity. Thrinny has a whole anti-grav cart for her plasma caster, which is roughly the size of a small motorcycle and glows with an angry purple light. The thing has more warning labels than a pharmaceutical commercial. Temperature regulation is critical, Thrinny announces to anyone within earshot. The plasma coils need to maintain exactly 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Any variance, and the containment field destabilizes. It's very sophisticated. What happens if the containment field destabilizes? Asks a slug-like alien named Plorks. Catastrophic energy release within a 3-meter radius, Thrinny says cheerfully. That's why we have the regeneration pods. Jake makes a mental note to stand at least 4 meters away. Gorp arrives with his entourage, and his molecular destabilizer looks less like a weapon and more like someone robbed a server farm. It's all cables and processing units and blinking lights. One of Gorp's support blobs is literally just holding a cooling fan. The quantum calculations alone require 47 teraflops of processing power, Gorp brags, jiggling with pride. And the satellite uplink needs a clear line of sight with less than 0.1 second latency. Weather can be an issue, obviously, and any significant electromagnetic interference will scramble the targeting matrix, but in ideal conditions, it's unstoppable. Lots of conditions there, Jake observes. That's what makes it sophisticated, Gorp retorts, unlike primitive weapons that just work stupidly all the time. Other students unpack similarly impressive arsenals. There's a graviton disruptor that can crush targets into singularities, but needs 10 minutes to charge between shots. There's a phased energy lance that can shoot through walls, but requires manual recalibration for each different wall material. There's something called a causality inverter that Jake doesn't even pretend to understand, but apparently needs 3 people to operate and has a user manual thicker than most religious texts. Professor Krelltalk strides into the facility, like he owns the place, which he probably does, given how much the Academy pays him. He's wearing what Jake assumes is formal military dress, all medals and sashes across his 4-armed frame. Welcome, students, to your moment of glory, Krelltalk announces. Today you demonstrate not just weapons, but the pinnacle of your civilization's technological achievement. Our observers are eager to see what the next generation of galactic warriors brings to the table. He pauses dramatically. Safety protocols are now active. Force fields are at maximum strength. Medical teams are standing by. We have 3 regeneration pods online, and 4 more on backup power. Insurance adjusters are present, legal counsel is available, and the cafeteria has promised to name a sandwich after anyone who suffers a training accident that goes viral on the galactic net. Thrinny raises an arm. What kind of sandwich? Focus, Miss Thrinny, Krelltalk snaps. Now then, Mr. Murphy should be arriving with his presentation any moment, assuming he managed to find it. He messaged me yesterday, asking if the facility had fire extinguishers, which I found both amusing and concerning. As if on cue, Jake walks in carrying an old canvas case. It's green, worn, and has stains that might be oil or might be barbecue sauce. Hard to tell. The case has metal clasps that look like they predate faster than light travel, and there's a faded Earth military insignia on one side. The laughter starts immediately. Is that fabric? Someone whispers. Did he wrap his weapon in organic fibers? Thrinny asks, horrified. It's held together with metal pins, Gorp observes. Actual physical metal pins, not even magnetic locks. Jake sets the case down gently on his assigned station. He doesn't open it yet. Just stands there, calm as a summer morning, while 46 aliens and 1 smug professor stare at him like he just brought a crayon drawing to an art gallery. Krelltalk's translator makes a sound that might be a prode. Sigh. Well, Mr. Murphy, I suppose we should be grateful you didn't bring it in a paper bag. We'll begin demonstrations shortly. Try not to injure yourself before your turn. The paperwork would be extensive. Jake nods, says nothing, and waits. The demonstrations kick off with all the subtlety of a fireworks factory explosion. Thrinny goes first, because of course she does, hauling her plasma caster into position like it's the crown jewels of the Mantis homeworld. Observe, she announces, flipping switches that make the weapon hum like an angry beehive. Target acquisition at 300 meters. Atmospheric compensation active, thermal tracking engaged. A holographic target materializes downrange. It's shaped like a generic hostile alien, the kind that looks threatening without offending anyone's actual species, probably. Thrinny pulls the trigger. The plasma caster screams, lights flash, and a bolt of superheated death lances across the range and obliterates the target in a spectacular explosion of light and sound. The observation deck applauds politely. Devastation incarnate, Thrinny says smugly. Then the weapon starts beeping. Ah, yes. Mandatory cooldown cycle. 5 minutes for the thermal regulators to stabilize. Standard procedure. So you can fire once every 5 minutes? Jake asks innocently. It's a very powerful shot, Thrinny snaps. Quality over quantity. Right, Jake says. What if there are 2 enemies? Thrinny's mandibles click in irritation. Then I would use tactical positioning and environmental awareness to manage the engagement window. It's called strategy. Murphy. Look it up. Gorp goes next, and it takes his entire support team 3 minutes just to set up the molecular destabilizer. Cables snake across the floor, processors whine to life, and somewhere a satellite in orbit probably wakes up wondering why it's being bothered. Targeting, Gorp announces, and his support blobs frantically adjust settings. Quantum lock achieved. Dimensional phase alignment at 97%. Initiating destabilization sequence. A new target appears. Gorp's weapon doesn't make a satisfying explosion noise. It just hums menacingly for about 10 seconds. The target shimmers, flickers, and then sort of folds in on itself like reality got bored with it existing. Gone, Gorp says triumphantly. Completely removed from this dimensional plane. No armor can stop it. No shield can block it. What happens if the satellite link drops? Jake asks. It won't, Gorp says defensively. The connection is triple redundant. But if it does, then there's a catastrophic feedback loop that could theoretically phase shift the operator instead of the target. But that's only happened twice during testing, and both times they were recovered within a week, mostly intact. Comforting, Jake mutters. The demonstrations continue. Plorks demonstrates his graviton disruptor, which creates a miniature black hole that crushes the target into a marble-sized sphere of compressed matter. Unfortunately, the weapon needs 10 minutes to charge between shots and produces enough waste heat to warm a small building. Energy efficiency is for cowards, Plorks declares, while technicians frantically adjust the facility's cooling systems. A reptilian student named Scrix shows off her phased energy lance, which shoots through the target, the wall behind it, and keeps going until it hits the secondary containment field. Unlimited penetration, she says proudly. Nothing can hide. What if you need to shoot something without hitting everything behind it? Jake asks. You adjust the phase variance based on material density calculations, Scrix explains. There's a chart. It's only 47 pages. Per material type, adds her assistant. The causality inverter goes last before Jake's turn, operated by a 3-person team who spend more time arguing about temporal mathematics than actually firing the weapon. When they finally do, the target knight explodes before they pull the trigger, which is apparently the point. We shot it in the past, one of them explains. Causality is more of a suggestion than a rule. Does it work if you don't have 3 physics PhDs operating it? Jake asks. Theoretically, no. Practically, also no. But it's very impressive at parties. Throughout all of this, Professor Krell-Talk provides running commentary, praising the sophistication, the technological advancement, the sheer complexity of each weapon system. He uses words like elegant and refined, and exemplar of civilized warfare. The military observers in their shielded deck take notes. Lots of notes. Possibly they're writing shopping lists, or penning resignation letters. Hard to tell from this distance. Finally, inevitably, Krell-Talk turns to Jake. And now, he announces, and Jake swears he hears disappointment in the translator's voice. We arrive at humanity's contribution. Mr. Murphy, please demonstrate your species' primitive offering so we can all learn what not to do. Try to avoid injuring yourself. The insurance company specifically asked me to mention that. Jake stands up, walks to his station, and unclasps the canvas case. The aliens lean forward, curiosity overcoming their smugness. Jake opens the case. Inside, resting on foam padding that looks older than most of the students, is a rifle. Not a plasma rifle, or an energy rifle, or a quantum rifle. Just a rifle. Wood stock, metal barrel, bolt-action mechanism. It looks like something that belongs in a museum, or possibly mounted above a fireplace in a cabin somewhere. The silence is deafening. Then Thrinny starts laughing. Then Gorp. Then the entire class dissolves into hysterics. That's it? Thrinny manages between clicks. That's your advanced weapon? It looks like agricultural equipment. Does it require manual reloading? Gorp asks, jiggling with mirth. Do you have to physically insert the projectiles by hand? Oh my, Professor Krell-Talk says, and even his translator sounds amused. Mr. Murphy, I expected low-tech, but this is archaeological. Does it at least have electronic targeting? Jake picks up the rifle, checks the action with practiced ease, and loads 5 rounds into the internal magazine with smooth, efficient movements. Nope, he says simply. Jake shoulders the rifle like he's done it 10,000 times before, because he has. The weight settles into place, familiar and comfortable. He doesn't bother with the fancy holographic targets. Instead, he points at the range control panel. Give me 5 targets, random distances, random timing, whatever you want. Krell-Talk's translator makes an amused sound. As you wish, Mr. Murphy. This should be brief. 5 targets materialize downrange. Different distances, different sizes, scattered across the range like someone threw darts at a map. Before anyone can blink, before the observers can adjust their fancy recording equipment, Jake fires. Crack. Bolt back. Bolt forward. Crack. Bolt back. Bolt forward. Crack. 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 5 shots. Maybe 4 seconds total. 5 targets drop, each with a hole punched clean through center mass. The laughter stops. Jake calmly ejects the empty magazine, reloads another 5 rounds, and looks at Krelltalk. Again. 10 more targets appear. 10 more shots. 10 more holes. Jake's breathing hasn't even changed. Okay, Thrinny says slowly. But that's just accuracy. My plasma caster can do that with computer assistance. Can it do it after swimming through a river? Jake asks. He signals the range technicians. Underwater simulation, please. The range shimmers, and suddenly Jake's standing in 3 feet of holographic water. It's not real, but the environmental sensors treat it like it is. Thrinny's plasma caster would short out instantly. Gorp's molecular destabilizer would lose satellite connection. Jake fires 5 more rounds. 5 more targets fall. Okay, but electromagnetic interference would scramble your comment. Targeting. Gorp protests weakly. I don't have electronic targeting, Jake reminds him. He calls out again. Maximum EM interference, please. The air fills with invisible electromagnetic chaos that makes half the observation equipment freak out. Scrix's phased energy lance would be completely useless right now. The causality inverter team is frantically checking their equipment. Jake keeps firing. The rifle doesn't care about electromagnetic interference. The rifle doesn't even know what electromagnetic interference is. It's a piece of wood, some metal, and controlled explosions. Physics hasn't changed in the last few million years. Battery life? Jake asks the stunned crowd. Infinite. No power source needed. Maintenance requirements? Clean it once a month, maybe. Operating temperature range? -40 to +60 Celsius, no problem. Works in vacuum with the right rounds. Works in atmosphere. Works in sandstorms, rainstorms, and electrical storms. Works if you drop it in mud. Works if you haven't touched it in 20 years. He fires again, this time while walking, then while moving laterally, then from behind cover. Every shot hits. Failure rate, Jake continues. With proper maintenance, basically 0. This design is 200 years old. The actual rifle I'm holding is 70 years old. My grandfather carried it. My father carried it. I've put 10,000 rounds through it personally. Still works perfectly. Thrinny's mandibles hang open. But the stopping power. Surely a small metal projectile can't compare to plasma or molecular destabilization. Jake gestures at the target. See that hole? That's not a burn mark or a phase shift. That's a physical projectile traveling at 800 meters per second, carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through most body armor, cover, and concealment. It doesn't rely on energy shields failing or dimensional mathematics being correct. It just goes through stuff. He cycles the action again. And here's the beautiful part. This rifle costs about 800 Earth dollars to manufacture. Thrinny, what does your plasma caster cost? 40,000 credits, she admits quietly. Gorp? 80,000, not including the satellite subscription service. Jake nods. For the price of one of your fancy toys, humanity can arm 100 soldiers with reliable, effective weapons that work anywhere, anytime, in any conditions. We can train someone to use this competently in a week. How long does it take to become certified on a molecular destabilizer? 6 months, Gorp says, deflating slightly. Ammunition? Jake pulls a small box from his pocket. 50 rounds, fits in my hand, costs about $20, no special storage requirements. Won't explode if you look at it wrong. Doesn't need refrigeration or magnetic containment or quantum stabilization. Just brass, powder, and lead. Chemistry so simple we figured it out centuries ago. Professor Krelltalk has gone very quiet. His forearms are crossed in what Jake has learned is alien body language for, I'm thinking very hard and don't like my conclusions. Jake fires his last round, then holds up the rifle. No cooling period, no calibration, no support team, no satellite uplink, no charging time, no computer assistance, no environmental restrictions. Just point and shoot. Works every single time. He sets the rifle down gently on his station. You all called this primitive. You know what we call it? Reliable. You can keep your sophisticated weapons that need a PhD to operate and work beautifully under perfect conditions. We'll stick with what actually functions when everything goes wrong. The observation deck is frantically taking notes now. Jake can see the military observers talking urgently among themselves. Plorks raises a tentacle hesitantly. But surely modern armor makes kinetic weapons obsolete. Jake smiles. It's not a nice smile. You want to test that theory? Because we have armor-piercing rounds, explosive rounds, incendiary rounds, subsonic rounds for stealth, supersonic rounds for range. We've spent 200 years perfecting the art of making small pieces of metal do exactly what we need them to do. He pauses. Turns out, when you can't rely on fancy technology, you get really good at making simple technology extremely effective. The silence in the range is absolute. Even the facility's humming equipment seems quieter. Krell finally speaks. I believe, he says slowly, that kinetic weapons may have been prematurely dismissed from galactic military doctrine. You think? Jake asks. Professor Krell does something Jake has never seen in 6 months at the Academy. He admits he was wrong, sort of, in the most academically roundabout way possible. But still, upon further reflection and empirical observation, Krell announces to the class, choosing his words like he's defusing a bomb. It appears that kinetic projectile weapons possess certain practical advantages that may have been overlooked in our pursuit of technological sophistication. Mr. Murphy, your demonstration was enlightening. Enlightening, Thrinny repeats flatly. Professor, he just made our entire arsenal look like expensive decorations. I prefer the term operationally situational, Krell corrects. Your weapons excel in their designed parameters, which are apparently never met in actual combat, Gorp mutters, jiggling sadly. The military observers descend from their shielded deck like vultures spotting roadkill. The first one to reach Jake is a silver-scaled reptilian with more medals than chest to pin them on. Cadet Murphy, I'm General Thax of the Consortium Special Operations Command. We need to discuss procurement options. For the rifle? Jake asks. For 10,000 rifles. Immediately. And trainers. And ammunition. And technical specifications. And honestly, do you have anything bigger? We have situations where reliable trumps sophisticated. Another observer. This. One, a floating crystalline entity, chimes in with a voice like wind chimes having an argument. The frontier colonies have been requesting weapons that function in high interference zones. Your kinetic solutions would be ideal. The resource efficiency alone, adds a third observer, who looks like an accountant grew tentacles. Do you realize the logistical advantage of ammunition that doesn't require quantum refrigeration? Jake finds himself surrounded by increasingly excited military personnel, all of whom spent the last hour watching him make their expensive weapon systems look like participation trophies. Back in the main area, his classmates are having what humans would call an existential crisis. Thrinny is staring at her plasma caster like it just betrayed her. Gorp has reduced his support team to 2 blobs, and looks like he's considering making it 1. 5-minute cooldown, Thrinny whispers. I bragged about a 5-minute cooldown. He fired 50 rounds in the time it takes me to fire 10. At least your weapon doesn't require 3 operators and a satellite, Gorp offers. That's not comforting, Gorp. Plork slithers over to Jake's station, eyeing the rifle like it might bite him. Murphy, can I ask you something? Sure. Is this really your most advanced weapon? Jake pauses. He looks at the rifle. He looks at Plork's. He grins. Actually, no. This is just my hunting rifle. I use it for deer. Deer? Animals back home. This is sporting equipment. I left the military-grade stuff at home because I thought bringing an anti-material rifle to a school demonstration might be overkill. Plork's species doesn't have a concept of blood draining from faces, but if they did, his would be doing it. You have bigger versions? Oh yeah. We have rifles that can punch through vehicle armor from 2 kilometers away. We have rifles that can fire 100 rounds without reloading. We have rifles so quiet you can't hear them from 10 meters away. We have rifles that can shoot around corners. We've had 2 centuries to get creative with what you call obsolete technology. Why didn't you bring one of those? Jake shrugs. Didn't think I needed to. Turns out I was right. Professor Krell approaches, and for the first time since Jake met him, the professor looks uncertain. Mr. Murphy, the Academy would like to discuss adding a kinetic weapons module to the curriculum. Would you be interested in a teaching assistant position? Will it pay better than student housing that tries to moisturize me at 6 a.m.? Significantly. Then yes. Over the next week, word spreads. Jake becomes the Academy's most unlikely celebrity. Students who couldn't be bothered to learn his name are suddenly very interested in primitive Earth technology. The cafeteria actually does name a sandwich after him. It's called the Murphy Special, and it's basically just meat between bread, no fancy molecular gastronomy, which feels appropriate. Requisition orders start flooding in from across the consortium. Turns out, when you've been fighting wars with expensive temperamental technology for centuries, the idea of weapons that just work becomes very attractive, especially to the units that operate in harsh environments, behind enemy lines, or anywhere the glossy, perfect conditions don't exist. Jake's uncle sends a message. "Kid, I've got 17 different alien species asking me about rifles." "What the hell did you do up there?" Jake sends back. "Brought a gun to a laser fight." Turns out that's not a disadvantage. The final class session before break, Professor Kreltalk addresses everyone with what might actually be humility. This semester, we have all learned a valuable lesson. Sophistication is not synonymous with superiority. Sometimes the simple solution is the correct solution. Sometimes technology advances so far that we forget why the old methods worked in the first place. He looks directly at Jake. Humanity may be new to the galactic stage, but perhaps they have maintained something the rest of us lost in our rush toward complexity. The understanding that reliability beats sophistication when lives are on the line. Thrinny raises an arm. "Does this mean humans aren't primitive anymore?" Kreltalk's translator manages to sound almost amused. "Miss Thrinny, I'm beginning to think they never were. They simply chose a different definition of advanced." After class, Jake packs up his canvas case, the old rifle resting inside like it's done nothing special. Because for the rifle, it hasn't. It's just been doing what it was designed to do 200 years ago. Work. Gorp jiggles up beside him, noticeably less arrogant than 6 weeks ago. "Murphy, I owe you 20 credits. The bet." "Keep it," Jake says. "Buy yourself a gun. I don't think I can afford one as reliable as yours." "Sure you can. That's the point." Jake walks out of the facility, past the observation deck being retrofitted for kinetic weapons testing, past the requisition office, now staffed by 3 additional personnel, just to handle Earth orders, past a bulletin board advertising a new elective, applied primitive warfare techniques. His datapad pings. It's a message from Earth Defense Command. "Congratulations on not starting a war. Also, you kind of started a gold rush. Weapons manufacturers are hiring. Interested?" Jake thinks about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Yeah," he types back. "I could do that." Turns out, sometimes the best way to prove you belong with the advanced civilizations isn't to match their sophistication. It's to remind them why simple solutions survived while complex ones got left behind. And if that doesn't work, you can always just shoot straighter than everyone else.